This chart reading is for September 4th, 1993 at 7:37 in the morning in Lacrosse, Wisconsin. And and you kind of expressed that you're kind of getting into astrology and that you are learning your planetary placements and would like more information on that. And you said you're kind of struggling to understand like what the houses mean, or like what are houses. So I'll read your chart, but then I'll kind of give information about that kind of stuff too. Um, and I just want to say that the way I learned astrology is pretty much the way that you seem to be learning it. Um, like I don't know about specifics about your situation, but in general, first I learned my sun and then my moon, and then I branched out to the other planets, to Mercury, Venus, Mars. Um, and then it wasn't until after I had kind of gotten a firm understanding of the planets that I then, like, it took me years to understand the houses. I just didn't get it for a long time. Um, so yeah, so I would recommend to learn it exactly the way you're doing it, just because that's what I did and that's what I found to be successful. But really, there's only four things in astrology. There's signs, planets, houses, and aspects. And I personally learned it in that order: signs, planets, houses, aspects. Um, yeah, and ultimately, you need all of those to be able to read a chart. Um, but yeah, going about it the way you're doing it, that's what I would do. You know, even if you just know, like even if you just know the sun sign and the moon sign of a person, that will tell you a lot of information, and that's enough. Like I wouldn't use just a sun sign. Just sun sign astrology is pretty limited. But if you can just understand, like a lot of people don't know their birth times, but you could use for most charts you could tell the moon sign just from the birth date, even if you don't have the time. So that's how I learned, was I just kept asking people for their birth information and looking up their sun and their moon sign, and that really helps you get to see patterns with the signs and sort of start figuring things out that way. Um, yeah, and then each planet is sort of a different part of the personality. And so I have your chart displayed here. This is through Astro Theme, and I know that most people use Astro Dienst. So if it looks kind of weird, I'm sorry. I just prefer this site, so that's what I use. Um, okay, so first let me just talk about your chart in general. Um, and I try to be objective. I don't want to say too many good things and be like just flattering you, but I also don't want to be like criticizing you. Really, I'm just kind of observing and just seeing patterns that I've noticed. So I just don't want, like there's no good chart or bad chart, and everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. Like in astrology, it kind of teaches you that each placement or each trait is sort of, it could be a strength or a weakness usually. So I don't see any chart as bad. Okay, so getting into your chart, you have Sun in Virgo, Moon in Aries, with Virgo rising, and I could kind of talk about the houses because for your chart in particular, the houses they would make a lot of difference. So if you look at these little lines that come off of the planet, so the orange dot with the circle around it, that's the sun. So it's saying that it's at 11 degrees Virgo, and then there's that little orange line coming off of it that shows exactly where it's at in Virgo. And then AC on the very left side is your rising, and it's at 23 degrees Virgo. So that means that, like, that basically the left side of the chart where it says AC is the eastern horizon when you're born, and then the right side where there's that other little black triangle on the far right side of the chart, that would be the western horizon. So the sun and the moon and all the planets rise in the east from the eastern horizon, and then they rise up through the sky, and then they set in the west, into the west part of the sky. Um, so the AC or the rising or the ascendant, or also known as the first house cusp, is just the point where things first rise. The midheaven is the very top, like the highest part of the ecliptic, where the sun or the planets are at the highest, and then the descendant is the setting point. Okay, and I'm just explaining that because that sort of um, those 3 points, the ascendant with the midheaven, which is the top of the sky, and then the descendant where everything sets. Those 3 points, along with the IC is basically the black triangle at the bottom, which is like the bottom of the sky, which you obviously can't see because it would be underground, but it's opposite the top of the sky. Those 4 points basically set up the basis of the houses. Um, so the signs are based on constellations. So um, they appear to, like, the signs would appear to rise and set throughout the day and the night, but planets, how do I explain that? They generally move relatively slow through the signs because it's because you're looking at like even though the sun rises and sets every day and it appears to be moving in that aspect. It's moving relatively slowly compared to the constellations, and that's what the signs are about. What the houses are is it's not relative to the fixed stars or to the constellations. What it's relative to is the horizons and whatever's at the top of the sky. So when you were born, the constellation Gemini was at the top of the sky, sort of basically. The area of the sky, which is represented by the sign Gemini, was at the top of the sky. And so anyway, so the sun, it makes a huge difference in the chart. Like those 4 points that I mentioned, the horizons, the top of the sky, and the bottom of the sky, it makes a huge difference which side of those points the planets are. So for you, the sun had just risen. Like if you look at the chart, it's just above the AC, so it had just moved above the eastern horizon, and that would have a totally different effect on your personality if you were born a little bit earlier, just before sunrise. Your personality would be totally different, basically. Um, what the difference is, that's kind of where you get into houses. So if you were born just before sunrise, the sun would be in the first house. But because you were born just after sunrise, the sun is in the 12th house. So if you think about the time you were born, like 7:37 in the morning. So when the sun first rises, you have the beautiful sunrise, but everything is starting to be illuminated, but like it's almost kind of dreamy and weird, and you might be kind of groggy, like still waking up. So it's like this kind of dreamy, weird, foggy energy, and it could be very beautiful, but there's like you're not really awake yet. You're not really like the day hasn't gained its momentum yet. It's kind of I don't want to say weak, but it's like it's sleepy. It's like it's just it hasn't gotten going yet, if that makes sense. So that's sort of what the 12th house is like. The 12th house represents things that are mysterious and misunderstood and not seen very obviously. So having your sun in the 12th house means that, like, the sun represents your ego and the sort of outgoing side of your personality. And because it was in the 12th house is unseen, it's very mysterious and weird, or, foggy, misunderstood. It's not really, it would make you sort of a complex person, but you're not able to be understood very directly sometimes. Um, like growing up, these are just patterns I've noticed with sun or moon in the 12th house in general, but with the sun, since the sun represents your ego, or your external part of your personality, the outgoing side of yourself, that was sort of shut down when you were a child. Like you might have had one or both parents be very disapproving of you, or some kind of family situation where you felt like you couldn't express yourself or you weren't allowed to be you. Like you were just shut down or something. And so that's a really hard placement. um, and what it does is it kind of obscures that part of yourself. So it might have taken you a lot of time to even sort of learn about that part of yourself or learn how to express yourself. Um, and it makes you kind of a late bloomer, but it has a lot of benefits as well. Because like the downside is you might often be misunderstood, but you're also kind and compassionate to others, and very forgiving, or very like it just makes you more of a kind, gentle person because you know what it's like to be misunderstood. So you're not very judgmental of others. You're very open minded, and it just makes you a more compassionate person. So it's harder growing up, but it also makes you more. It gives you a tendency to be intuitive, so you might just be naturally intuitive. Um, yeah, so there's the 12th house has a lot of implications. Um, okay, but in general, so I kind of focused a lot on that one place there, but in general, so just zooming out a little bit, you've got Sun in Virgo, Moon in Aries, and these are two very different signs that you're combining. Like I said, the Sun and the Moon sort of form the gist of the personality. They form a lot of the personality. If you look, like the most obvious planets, so to speak, in the sky are very obviously the Sun and the Moon. So these kind of affect our personality the strongest. Your Sun is the external, active part of you, or the Yang or masculine side, and then the Moon is the more feminine or like Yin, the interior side of you, your emotions and your core. It could also be your mind, although Mercury represents mind or communication. But the Sun is more the casual you, and then the Moon is the more intimate you. So a lot of the times, like your coworkers or friends might know you as your Sun sign, as Virgo. But people who know you really well, like really close friends or family, might know you to be Aries. So you might come off as maybe shy or introverted and almost like timid a little bit, or maybe sort of a softer energy. But people who know you well know that can actually be really fiery, and you can be very forthright. You're probably a very direct person, because Virgo and Aries are very different. They're quincunx. One is earth, one is fire, one is mutable, one is cardinal, one is like they're extremely different. But they do have a couple things in common. They're both very direct signs. So you're probably like a no nonsense person. You know, like I still stand by what I said, where I think that you're very probably kind and compassionate. Um, you're probably open minded. You don't judge people too quickly, but at the same time, you're probably forthright and direct and kind of no nonsense and efficient. And it's very difficult. It's difficult to have such different signs in one person, in one personality. Because the nature of Virgo and Aries are just so different, and you are both. Um, on the on the outside, um, you're Virgo, so you could be very filtered, because Virgo is sort of a more shy sign. It's intellectual, and it's very earthy, and has a healthy skepticism. Is very analytical. So you have all that going on the outside, but on the inside, your emotions, which are ruled by the moon, is in Aries. So you have this super fiery, spontaneous, almost childlike energy on the inside, but it's almost like capped by the Virgo sun. So sometimes, like, it might be hard for you to get all your energy out. You have this like constant fire inside of you, and the Virgo part of you like strategizes what to do with all that energy, basically. Um, yeah, and sometimes it might be hard to know how to channel that. Um, one of the commonalities between Virgo and Aries is also that they're both they expect a lot from themselves. They're both kind of do it yourself signs. So You probably have very high standards for yourself, but I think you also have a lot of energy. They're both very productive signs. Like, you want to get stuff done, you want to do projects and stuff, and you have this. You want perfection. Like, I knew a girl in my high school who, I think she was actually no, or no, she was Virgo Sun Aries Moon too, and she was literally OCD, and everything had to be absolutely perfect. And she did seem like a perfect person. She was nice and she got straight A's and everything, but she was literally OCD. Like, it was an actual thing that everything had to be absolutely perfect. So you might struggle with that. Like, and again, it could be good or bad. There's pros and cons to every trait. So um so you probably have a lot of energy, and you want direction, you want goals. You're probably very, I don't want to say ambitious necessarily. You might be ambitious, but like, you probably have a lot of motivation or a lot of energy, a lot of dopamine. But at the same time, it might be hard to control. It might be hard to, like, you might have a restless mind, and you know you don't want to miss the forest for the trees, I guess, because that's a common Virgo thing where you might get too lost in the details. Although your 12th house energy, like, you're also capable of kind of zooming out and being a little bit detached, so that might help with that. But yeah, and I think Bernie Sanders is, I think he's Virgo Sun Aries Moon as well. So like, he's a very motivated person, and I'm not gonna what's the word? Like, I'm not gonna get political here. I'm not advocating Bernie Sanders. I'm not gonna say my opinion here, whether I'm for or against him. But just in general, he's a very fiery person. Like, he seems like he really believes in what he's saying, and he's articulate. Articulate. He could speak. Virgo kind of rules communication to an extent. Usually, it's like writing. Um, but he's a very passionate person, and so you could kind of see similarities there, maybe. Um, okay, and then you were curious. You asked about going by each planet, what it means. You're just kind of learning about these other planets. So, like I said, you've got Sun in Virgo, Moon in Aries. Mercury is always within like 30 degrees or one sign from the Sun. So most people have Mercury in the same sign as their Sun sign, or it could be one sign off. But yeah, you have Mercury in Virgo and Sun in Virgo. So that's a good placement. Mercury is in domicile and exaltation in Virgo, so it does super well in Virgo. So you're probably just generally a smart person. You probably did well at school. Mercury's direct, so you could think very linearly. You probably had no problem. Like with schools, some people think very linearly, and some people are more sporadic. You could kind of do both, maybe, because I do think that you could be intuitive with these placements in the 12th house, but at the same time, you can also do the very linear kind of thinking. So you could probably do well in school. Um, yeah, yeah. In general, you would just have a good analytical ability. I think I said that before. Mercury, like, the sun is your ego and your how you exert yourself and your casual side of your personality, who you are during the day. Moon is the core emotional self on the inside, more intimate self. Mercury is your mind and how you communicate. And again, because Mercury is so close to the sun, usually they're both Virgo for you, so they're almost both two parts of the same thing. Like, your mind and your ego are mostly united. They're both Virgo, and that's how most people are. If for people who have Mercury in a different sign than their sun, they might, you know, it just brings in traits from that other sign, so they might communicate more like that other sign rather than their sun sign. But your Mercury and your sun are Virgo, so Virgo, you probably have a basic understanding of Virgo, but Virgo, like I said, is more analytical, more no nonsense. It's more realistic, and Virgos are known for cleaning, which is kind of silly, but not all Virgos like clean. Actually, a lot of Virgos are kind of cluttered, or they're not always super organized, but they always know where everything is, and everything's like sanitary. Like, I literally one time just saw this girl's desk, and I just guessed that she was a Virgo because it was kind of cluttered, but it looked very sanitary. And then everything was like, I could just tell she knew where everything was. Like, it wasn't a total mess. You could see everything, I think, or something like that. Um, so Virgos, they could be sometimes very clean and they can be sometimes very cluttered, but it's all about efficiency. Virgos are always working toward efficiency. So like, if you're working a lot and it just doesn't make sense to clean your house a lot, you might just let that slide. But it's all about efficiency. Everything's very logical, if that makes sense. Virgos are always analyzing, so you're probably constantly, your mind is always going, especially with your Aries moon, since you have that fire inside with the Virgo analytical mind. You're probably always thinking. You have a very active mind. um yeah, you're always thinking. Like, there might just be this grinding mental energy, and again, that could be good or bad. It might keep you up. It might be hard to sleep sometimes if you're thinking too much. But if you utilize that, you could be very intelligent. You could learn things, or you could put that energy to work and create a project or something. Really whatever you want. Okay. Anyway, but then you've got, so going out from there in general, the planets closer to the sun, like if you look at a model of the solar system, the inner planets closer to the sun more represent your personal personality, like more of your individual traits. And then as you go out, the outer planets are much slower, so they more apply to the generations than the individuals just in general. Um, and you can see this is kind of how I read a chart. Like, I start from the inside and work my way out. So I would start with the sun and moon like I did, and then Mercury. Then you've got Venus in Leo and Mars in Libra, and also Jupiter in Libra conjunct Mars. Um, I don't know if you know all the glyphs, but I'm just gonna go ahead anyway. Um, and I look for patterns. Like, one pattern, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, but one pattern that I'm noticing is that even though you're a Virgo, and Virgo is Earth, it's a yin sign. I don't really think of it as feminine. It's more yin, so it's more like quiet or introverted or resting energy. Virgo is more about learning. It's very observant. It's not so much about being super active. Um, it's more strategic with its energy. So your sun sign, that bulk of your personality is more introverted, but your moon, your Venus, and your Mars and Jupiter are all in yang signs. Um, or outgoing signs. They're in fire and air. So in general, you wouldn't be as introverted as your typical Virgo. Even though the sun is in Virgo in the 12th house, which is like, that placement on its own would be very introverted, very misunderstood and quiet, and have a lot, maybe just not be, it would have a lot of its personality that it either couldn't articulate to others or that it just would want to keep private. So like, that part of you would be introverted, but because your moon is in a very outgoing sign, your Venus is in Leo, which is also very outgoing, and then you've got Mars in Libra, which is air, so it's kind of outgoing too. All those placements would make you more extroverted. And I think you did tell me that you're an extrovert, so I want to stay objective and just read your chart. I'm not trying to cheat. But I could see that, you know, like, Virgo is introverted, but you would definitely be more outgoing than your, like, typical Virgo. Okay. Um, so Venus and Mars both, like, if I'm looking to how you act in relationships, or what kind of person you're attracted to, um, or like your flirtation style, or your style in relationships, that would be Venus and Mars for me. I would look at Venus and Mars for sure. Venus is the feminine. It's, love and beauty. It's more the feminine side of relationships. If you're attracted to women, it's what kind of woman you're attracted to. And then Mars is sort of the masculine counterpart to Venus. So Mars is more aggression and dominance, and it's how you assert yourself and how you react to crisis situations a lot of the time. But in relationships, it's, if you're interested in men, it's what kind of man you're attracted to. It could also just be like, if you're a man, it could be how you assert your masculinity in a relationship. Or vice versa. If you're a woman, it could be how you assert your femininity. in a relationship, and whether you're male or female, there's always both at play. Um, like every person has both feminine and masculine energy inside of them. It's just a balance. So there's always both at play, whether you're male or female in a heterosexual or homosexual relationship. There's always some level of both going on. Mars in general is more like sexual. Venus could be kind of sexual too, though. Um, so yeah, in relationships, you have Venus and Leo, which you're naturally confident in relationships. You want to have fun in relationships. You want to be with fun people. You're probably attracted to people who are fiery because you have your Venus in Leo, which is fire, and then you've also got your Moon in Aries, which is fire. So a fire sign for you, and fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. But someone with Sun or other planets in Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, you would relate to them really easily because you have your core self in Aries, which is very fiery. But also you probably be very attracted to them since your Venus is in Leo. Um, yeah, even if you're not attracted to women, I mean, there's kind of an interplay there, like I said. So you probably attract fire signs in general. You probably are attracted to kind of fiery, spontaneous, um, people that express themselves a lot. And Virgo likes directness, even though Virgo is introverted. You want someone to just be upfront and direct, and maybe a little bit fiery or passionate, or a little bit transparent with you. That would be attractive and relatable for you, probably. Um, Mars is in Mars is in Libra, which is a much less I don't want to say weaker, but like Venus in Leo is a very outgoing, prominent planet or prominent position. Mars is technically in detriment in Libra since it rules Aries. Um, so that has a couple implications. So you don't, it's almost kind of backwards. So when you're in a crisis situation, like the typical thing to do, like where if Mars were in Aries where it's more at home, the typical thing to do in a crisis situation would be to be fiery and just react really outgoingly to get mad or to I don't know, like if there's a confrontation you might fight a person, I guess, um or just to act instinctively and just do something, just do something. I'm having a hard time articulating this, but um the typical thing would be to just do something bold and fiery and instinctive without even thinking about it. But because Mars is in Libra for you, it's opposite. Libra is more detached. It's not instinctive. It's more of an observing sign, observational sign. So in crisis situations, you would actually stay very cool and calm, and your first instinct would just be to like stop and just think about the situation. um and that can be really good but also really bad. Like it could make people think that you're crazy because something like terrible happens and you seem to have no reaction, so people might think that you don't understand what's going on, or they might think that you don't care. And really it's not either of those. It's just that you're processing what's going on in your own way, and it could be a huge strength because you keep your head on in crisis situations. So you could probably keep totally cool and just act totally logically and just do what needs to be done, basically. Um, so that yeah, Mars is technically in detriment. It's technically a difficult placement, but it could also be very good in that aspect too. Um, Also, Mars in detrimented placements in general are kind of weird, or you might, Mars is what you fight for or how you fight, and because it's in detriment, if you are fighting for something, it would be something that is maybe somewhat counterculture or something not accepted by society. So it, um, you might have unpopular opinions or be fighting for unpopular beliefs, something like that. I don't know if that makes sense, but um, and also like so you can start to learn each planet by sign. Well, I guess I should finish with Mars first. So also Mars is um who you're attracted to and your style and relationships. So you hmm I would say you're very direct in relationships because, like I said, you're Virgo and Aries, which is those are both very direct signs. But also, Venus and Leo is very transparent with its emotions in relationships. So, you're probably very honest in relationships, and you're probably not afraid to say how you feel about somebody in the beginning stages. You don't mind initiating. But at the same time, Mars and Libra, like you might also like it when the other person initiates, so maybe there's kind of a balance there. Mars and Libra. Um, or you might be kind of dominant but submissive at the same time sexually, because Mars and Libra would be more of a kind of like it's almost kind of flipped because Venus is more of a feminine energy, but it's in a very more masculine sign, and then Mars is more of the masculine energy, but it's in more of a kind of feminine sign. So there's almost like a, I guess they sort of balance each other in a backward way. I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense at all, but in relationships you could kind of do both. You could kind of be the initiator, but you could also kind of be the follower in the relationship. Um, you might you might want to balance there. You might want some kind of balance in a person. Where sometimes you lead, sometimes the other person leads, something like that. Okay, I'm talking kind of a lot about relationships, but that's just because Venus and Mars. Um, Venus and Mars also have to do with like desires and whether it's what you desire or how you make yourself desirable. They can rule your appearance a little bit. Um, So I heard that Venus in Leo likes sweets a lot. So I don't know if you have a sweet tooth, but that's like one possible. Just because it could rule like what you enjoy. You might really like to get gifts or to give gifts with Venus and Leo. Um, yeah, and okay, and then once you start to know the planets and their signs, you could look to how they angle, what kind of angles they make with each other, and those are called aspects. So, for example, oh, and they're represented by the lines in the middle of the chart. I don't really use the lines. What I do personally is I just see that like I just know that like for instance Libra, where your Mars and Jupiter are, Libra opposes Aries. So because you have your Moon about halfway through Aries at 19 degrees, and then you have your Mars and Jupiter at 15 degrees Libra, that means that your moon is opposing Mars and Jupiter. Oh, this is kind of random, but if you're male, because I don't want to say what gender you are, but if you were male, um, usually there's like a large dick size indicated by Mars conjunct Jupiter. So that's just a pattern when Mars rules your masculinity and Jupiter rules like expansion and makes things large. So when Mars and Jupiter are either conjunct or trine, it usually means a large male reproductive organ. And that that's just a pattern that I've noticed. I haven't found anyone that deviates from that pattern yet, but that's something I'm testing, so I just thought I would mention that. But anyway, what I was talking about was Mars and Jupiter and Libra are opposing. You can kind of see that they're directly opposite from your moon. Um, and then you could learn about aspects too. And if it's overwhelming for you, like I learned everything kind of one by one. Like I learned signs, pretty much signs, then planets, then houses, then aspects. If you like to jump around and whatever works for you, obviously you can learn how you want to. But me personally, I would just go one step at a time, just because it could be kind of confusing to learn all of it. But But if you're interested in however you learn, but eventually at some point you could learn about aspects too. So with any kind of opposition, um, it's opposites attract, but you're dealing with two. Um, like I guess you could kind of see it with signs because the signs themselves aspect each other. So like I said, Libra opposes Aries, and in a way, they almost become so different at the opposite side of the zodiac that they actually have a lot in common. There's a lot different, but a lot in common, and that's kind of um, like opposites in general are kind of like that in a way. And I don't know if you know about elements or modes or exactly what you know astrologically, but like Libra and Aries are both yang because one is fire, one is air. Aries is fire, Libra is air. Um, so they're sort of similar but opposite in that aspect, and they both begin seasons. Aries is the first sign of spring, and Libra is the first sign of fall. Um, so they're opposite, but they do have some things in common. They just start completely different phases of the year. Aries starts spring, which is at least in the northern hemisphere. Aries starts spring, which is all about regeneration and initiation and growth, and that's why it's very fiery and it's the leader. And then Libra is opposite that, and it starts fall, which is more of a degenerative process. Um, and so Libra is more about sort of refining things, and it's more kind of detached and like the beginning of spring is more exciting and like everything's new and everything's beginning. The beginning of fall is more refined and more just cool and detached, and it could have different interpretations, I guess, but you're basically combining two very different energies that sort of clash together, and so that can be very problematic because it's hard. You need to integrate these two very different energies. Um, but like I said, they do have some things in common, so you usually can meet in the middle to sort of satisfy both of them. Okay, and for you in particular, you have your moon in Aries, so emotionally, you're very, you have that early spring energy, that fiery energy where you want to start things, and you could be very forthright with your emotions and very, you want things to be immediate. You don't want to go out and do things, make stuff happen. That's being opposed by your I don't want to say your masculinity, but the way you initiate, or the way you um like the way you assert yourself in general is it's hard for you to assert yourself without first taking into consideration the feelings and thoughts of other people. And that's sort of the, I don't want to say dysfunction because it's not necessarily bad, but that's sort of the backward nature of Mars in Libra, the detriment. Because Mars is usually how you exert yourself and how, the selfish side of you, but Libra is all about balance and cooperation with others. So the way you exert yourself by its very nature is backward in the sense that you want to consider other people. So that's good. You're a nice person, but it can create complexity, or what's the word I'm looking for? It could be difficult for you to, you just have more on your plate in that aspect. It would be easier for you to just be an asshole and just exert yourself without first thinking about everyone else in the room or what have you. But um, yeah, okay, that's just a little bit about Mars and Libra, but it gets more complicated because your emotional self, your emotional core is in Aries, which is more. It is more selfish. It doesn't make you a selfish person in general. It could be a good thing too. It's just that you're more self-focused emotionally, which is good. You're very forthright. You know what you want, and um, your opinions on things and your thoughts, and that's good because if you're self-focused, you make it clear to other people, what your intentions are and whatnot, and so as long as they do the same with you, it could kind of have a nice setup for a good interaction, I guess, if that makes sense. So it's not bad to be selfish or self-focused. That could be actually a good thing, and it could be good for other people for you to be that way. It just gets complicated because there's this like contradiction in your personality that I'm sort of having a hard time articulating, where like the Mars side of you, which is your drive and your ambition and your how you assert your ego, that part of you is more considerate of others, whereas the deep emotional core of yourself is more thinking about yourself, and it's very fiery. So they sort of clash together. So I guess it's sort of about it's tricky. So you have to sort of balance self with other self, balance your needs with the needs of others, but balance your, like, sometimes you might have this split between um things that you're motivated about, that you're passionate about, and but between that and your core self. um yeah, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah, and it's not exact, but that is a thing. um it's kind of a hard aspect to read, honestly, because of the opposition and the detriment at the same time. um you have Lilith and Aries, so sexually you're probably very confident. And it's exactly quincunx your sun. So again, there's this sort of there's just a lot of contrast in your personality, which could be hard to integrate, but it could also be very useful because there are so many different sides to you. You have a rich personality. So the sun in Virgo is more shy, like I said, more refined and more modest and humble and just going about its business, minding its own business. But then you have Lilith and Aries, which is a very sexually confident placement, and a very like a badass placement. And so that could be hard to integrate as well. How do you combine being, just modest and analytical, which is the core? That's the core of your personality in a way. How do you combine that with like the badass sexual energy of Lilith and Aries? But you know, and it's that might be something that you might have to choose between one or the other at any given time, because they're just such different energies. But that's good that you could be like, again, you're generally more confident and outgoing than the average Virgo. So yeah, so that's good. And you probably don't. A lot of Virgos can get too worked up over very small details or issues, like very, I don't want to sound judgmental because I'm not, but like relatively trivial issues they could kind of get worked up over. I don't think that would apply so much to you because you have so much yang energy and fire and air, so you'd probably be relatively easygoing, especially with the sun in the 12th house. You can be Virgo, you can have that attention to detail and that realistic, pragmatic, analytical ability. But at the same time, I don't think you would get so worked up over mundane reality as perhaps other Virgos. You could kind of be easygoing and flexible, and you want to have fun and be spontaneous too, as well as be responsible. So that's nice. There's kind of a balance there. Okay, you have your South Node in ninth house Gemini and your North Node in Sagittarius. So when you're younger, you might have issues with being a people pleaser. You're very socially intelligent, and it's easy for you to kind of fit into any crowd. Um, but as you get older, you're more learning to be passionate about things, and maybe to get out of your head more and to get in more into your heart, if that makes sense, if that's not too cliche. Or to, like, you in your younger years, you might spend a lot of time developing skills or abilities, gaining knowledge, and then as you get older, the question is, how do you apply your skills or your knowledge? What kind of worthwhile jobs or projects could you use those on? And then also it's about authenticity. So learning to, obviously there could be issues involving being a people pleaser. That could be good, that you're very socially intelligent and that you can be adaptable and fit in with other people. But but you also want to remain authentic and be more passionate, I guess. So that's the North Node and the South Node are always an area for growth for people. The South Node is more who you were when you're younger, and it has to do with a lot of innate skills that you bring to this lifetime. But if you stay in your South Node, which is more of like your comfort zone, eventually it will be to your detriment. So you need to branch out to the North Node, and the South Node and the North Node are always exactly opposite. You have the North Node at 6 degrees Sagittarius, and the South Node is therefore opposite. So it would be at 6 degrees Gemini. So you're going from Gemini to Sagittarius. Um, so that's kind of where I'm getting that from. So Gemini is more of the people pleaser. It's more about gaining the skills or the knowledge. But Sagittarius is more fiery. It's more about being kind of bold and direct and not caring about what people think so much, or and it's also more about applying the knowledge or applying the skills, rather than just learning about things, if that makes sense. I could also see you have ice. So the IC is the bottom of the chart, the black triangle at the bottom, and the MC is exactly opposite. So it's at the top. Your IC is also kind of your childhood to an extent and how you're raised. Sometimes it could represent the mother, um, maternal influence in your life, and then the midheaven is opposite that, and it's kind of where you're going in life as well, and it's more of your career path or your life path. Um, so you have IC in Sagittarius, so that would make me think that maybe you moved around a lot as a kid, or maybe you were exposed to people or cultures that were different from your own, like maybe very different kinds of people with different backgrounds, or like you might have literally moved around a lot as a kid, or even if you didn't move around a lot, maybe there were just totally different kinds of people in your life, or you lived in different kinds of situations. Um, and so that kind of makes you very adaptable as a person and makes you able to just kind of go into new situations um, with an attitude that is carefree and open to new experiences. It would make you very open to new experiences, and um, yeah, and sort of intuitive about the world, if that makes sense. Like you just kind of walk into new situations and kind of just figure it out, because as a kid you would have a lot of very different experiences growing up. And then your midheaven is Gemini, so your whole life will just be a whole bunch of different chapters. Like this, it's like this long journey with no destination. So it's more about the journey than the destination. It's just all these kind of different chapters. It's this really interesting story. Um, and that might sound vague, but not everyone's life is really structured like that. Um, yours is just constantly changing. And again, that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's it could be good or bad, but um, yeah, your life is constantly changing and growing. You have a lot of stuff that's saying that it's about learning, because you have ascendant Mercury and Sun all in Virgo, so very strong Virgo placements. Um, but like I said, unlike most Virgos, you're more outgoing or more open to new experiences. So you want to go out into the world and have fun and play, but also you want to learn something, learn kind of some kind of skills or information. You also have midheaven in Gemini, as I mentioned, so that would be kind of learning from people in your career, um, learning, but also discussing what you're learning. So you could have a career. Let me see. You also have second house in Libra, which is a fellow air sign. Sixth house cusp in Aquarius. So your job looks very social. It looks like it has to do with talking to different kinds of people, relaying information. Maybe like that would be a good career for you. Something involving some kind of media, or at the very least just working with very different kinds of people from different walks of life, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, like you're probably very socially intelligent and very good at getting along with other people, and that would be a skill um, that would apply to your work situation really well. What else? I mean, and then in general, I could look at the outer planets. So, you have Uranus and Neptune conjunct in fourth house Capricorn. I mean, so you're part of a generation that has to do things differently. I'm also noticing you have this T square. I'm going to say more about that in a second, but you have a T square between Mars and Jupiter conjunct at 15 degrees Libra, Uranus and Neptune conjunct at 18 degrees Capricorn, and then Moon 19 degrees Aries. Okay, wow. So yeah, T scores get really intense. Once you start having an aspect not just between 2 points, but between 3 or 4 points, it just gets like 2 or 3 times more intense. Um, so you're meant to. Okay, in general. So going back to the Mars, I'm gonna attack this from the Mars standpoint. Mars is in detriment in your chart, so it initially it's more challenging. It is more challenging at first to have Mars in Libra. So growing up, you might have a hard time asserting yourself or sticking up for yourself, that kind of thing. But as you get older, you can definitely learn to improve in that area, and actually, you might even be that much better because of that initial challenge. Um, but because Mars is in detriment, the way you assert yourself, the way you assert your individuality and what you believe in is different from other people. It's sort of against the grain, or against maybe society, or against the normal way of doing things. You have your own style that you need to assert, um, even if it might be slightly weird or something. And not only that, but because Mars is conjunct Jupiter, square Uranus and Neptune, and opposing your moon, they're all in cardinal signs, and cardinal signs all initiate things. They all start a new direction. So even though it might be initially hard to assert yourself, I think once you get some momentum going, you'll find that you have this whole new thing to bring to the world, like this whole new style of doing things. Like the once you start asserting yourself or defending what you believe in, or whatever it is that you're defending or asserting, or whatever it is that you're ambitious for, whatever you're passionate about, you might find that it's very different from maybe other people or different from the world. It's something new and exciting and interesting, something that is new to the world, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense here. I don't know what that could mean exactly for you personally. Um, the people born in 1993 in general were born during the Uranus Neptune conjunction, which is a very rare conjunction. So anyone born during that time is part of a movement to introduce something completely new to the world, or to change directions in the world. So you already have that going with people your age in general. But because you have Mars, which is more personal, and it's how you assert your individuality, like I said, because you have that aspect in Uranus Neptune, it would be more personal for you. Like you would be asserting yourself in a new, different way. I don't know if that makes sense. In general, for stuff that's happening right now for you personally, oh well, I guess back to that. So also, this year we had this huge conjunction at around 21 degrees Capricorn, and because that's so close to your Uranus Neptune conjunction, I'm seeing how these placements affect people. So you probably were more affected by what happened this year than the average person. People born around your time in general would be affected by this year more than perhaps other sub generations. um, your worldview may have changed a lot this year. That sounds kind of vague, but you're shifting direction on a very fundamental level. This is also because you're in your late 20s, I believe, or you might be 30 or 29 or 30. And in your late 20s, there's multiple aspects that happen for everybody that shift a lot of things. So you have your Saturn return, which I think you mentioned um, in. Oh yeah, no, you're 26 because you're born 1993. Okay. Yeah. So you have. There's a few things that happen. There's the Saturn return, and then there's also the progressed new moon or progressed new lunar cycle, which sort of coincides with the Saturn return. And then you also have the nodes flipped or the nodal opposition. So like right now, like you have in your birth chart North Node in Sagittarius, but right now North Node is in Gemini, transiting. So the nodes are flipped from your nodes. Um, okay, so with the nodes, you have your first nodal return when you're 18. So that's when you want to break away from your family or break away from who you've been and do something totally new. You might have this awakening, this new energy, and what it does is it aligns you on your path. Like it sets you on this path that's true to who you are. And that could be very destructive if you had strayed from that path before. You could kind of destroy what you were doing in order to reset you back on that path. But usually it's more auspicious or more easy. It's easier with the nodal return. So that's a very positive time when you're 18. You're usually feeling very strong and you have a newfound sense of direction. About 8 years later, you have the nodal return, or I mean the nodal opposition. So it's opposite that. So instead of the north node transiting being conjunct your north node and the south node being conjunct your south node, they're opposite. So the north node is conjunct it's about to conjoin your south node, and the south node is about to conjoin your north node. So that could be a little bit more challenging, but it also has a lot of shared themes. And it also ties in with the Saturn return since your Saturn return starts only like a couple years later. Saturn has already dipped into Aquarius where your natal Saturn is, even though your Saturn is at the end of Aquarius, but you'll still feel the Saturn return sort of starting because Saturn has entered this your Saturn sign. And I could talk about Saturn returns. So Saturn returns. You might know a little bit about this already, but in astrology, you're not really considered an adult till you have your first Saturn return, which is when you're 28, 29, 30. And what that does is Saturn goes all the way around and it conjoins where it goes back to where it was when you were first born. And it forces you to grow up in a lot of ways. And some people say that not much happens during those years, and other people, it's very extreme. And it depends on where Saturn is in your chart, what it's aspecting, stuff like that. It also depends on in your 20s if you're living a life that is true to who you are. So like it's easy in your 20s to like it could be a million different things. Maybe you're just getting by on your good looks, or maybe you're drinking a lot, or maybe you're working a job just because it's a good job but it's not really what you want to do, or it could be anything. But if you're living a life that's not totally in line with who you are, or it's not true, or it's not responsible, or it's not sustainable, Saturn will come along and kind of destroy that, which can be obviously very difficult, very challenging, but it forces you to mature a lot, to grow up, to find new direction, and to live life more genuinely, I guess. So you're approaching that. Honestly, I am too. So I haven't experienced that personally yet, so I can't speak to it personally, but I've noticed that in people that's generally what happens. And then like I said, you're also having the nodal opposition. And the nodal opposition is a little bit similar. Both the nodal opposition and the Saturn return are very karmic. and they both change the direction of your life. So the nodal return is a little bit similar in the fact that if you weren't living totally authentically, the nodal return can kind of seem to destroy your life in order to set you on a path that's more right for you, I guess. It kind of resets you on the right direction to where you need to go, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, so in general, the late 20s could be a very hard time, very difficult time, but it's just about growing a lot and, becoming a true adult, I guess. Um, yeah, and you'll really start to experience that starting next year. Like, you're probably already feeling it a little bit just because the nodes by sign have entered the nodal opposition for you, and Saturn by sign has entered your natal Saturn sign. But those aspects aren't exact yet. They won't be exact for another year or two. But you're already feeling the foreshadowing of it. And with all that, I would just recommend that you, if you are intuitive at all, if you could kind of tap into that, or if you could make time for yourself to just chill and just kind of reflect about things, because usually you will get messages about these situations in your life. Like I said, that Saturn will just come along and destroy your life, but usually before that you will get signs for it if you're paying attention. But the problem is, a lot of times we're just not paying attention to the signs, so we don't see the signs saying like, hey, do this with your life, or this or that. So if you ignore the signs, that's when something destructive happens that forces you to realign. But if you can sort of see the signs first, or listen for that knowledge, or meditate on it, or whatever it is that you do to integrate things, that could be one strategy to sort of maybe not see what's going to happen before it happens, but see the general themes before they become um, destructive, I guess, if that makes sense. And it doesn't always have to be destructive. What I'm noticing is that with your Saturn return in your late 20s, it is a little bit isolating, because even if you're a very social person, even if you have a lot of friends and family, there's going to be some kind of issue that only you can face. And I think it's sort of a rite of passage into adulthood where um, either you are literally becoming isolated and doing a lot of soul searching and working on things on your own, or like maybe you have like a whole family, but the family doesn't realize how much you have to do to support everything, and maybe that's part of it, that you have this one challenge that maybe no one understands. And that could be a million different things. um, I mean, in general, you have Saturn in sixth house Aquarius, so people born in your general time period, you might be a leader when you get older. Because with Saturn, it takes time for these things to develop. So, like the people born with Saturn in Aquarius in general, a lot of them have social anxiety. They are afraid of groups, or they have a hard time relating to people, because Aquarius is a very social sign. It has to do with groups and potentially leading groups. And Saturn, it brings difficulty. It's hard for you in that area when you're younger, but then as you get older, especially once you're past your first Saturn return, and then once you're past your second or even third Saturn return, then you become much wiser in that area. And in general, I was already talking about your general personality, and it looks like you're a pretty social person anyway. But there might be some kind of difficulty maybe relating to people, relating to the community, or relating to groups, or, you know, being a leader with groups or something of that nature. There might just be something that you've always had sort of trouble with that you'll just naturally get better at over time. It's just a slow process, I guess. Um, but once you're older and wiser, you'll actually be an expert in that area. That's kind of what Saturn does, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, and let's see, I don't know where to go from here. Jupiter in Libra, first house. Any planets in the first house are kind of amplified. So since you have Mars and Jupiter conjunct in the first house, you might be you probably do have a lot of energy that you bring, that you exert. Um, like very direct, very jovial. You might have a happy-go-lucky personality, very easygoing. Um, you probably are good with people, even though that I did say Saturn and Aquarius brings difficulty with people, and there's probably something there, some kind of social anxiety or something there. But at the same time, in general, just looking at all these other planets, I would also say that you seem like you have an easy time relating to people and being social. Um, so a lot of times there's contradictions, but usually when I say stuff like that, it makes sense for people. So I don't know how exactly that plays out for you, but hopefully that makes sense. Um, you have Venus in the 11th house, so you do have good luck when it comes to relating to people and just accepting love from strangers. That sounds weird. I didn't mean it like that, but just meeting new people, stuff like that. Yeah, I think I said pretty much everything. I can always dig deeper. Like if you had a specific question, look at, I could always get more information about specific situations or specific parts of your personality. Um, but just in general, I think I just covered the basics of it. Um, you have Saturn in the 6th house, so you might have trouble with work at an early age. Like maybe you had to work really hard just to have a normal job, or um, if you were a business owner, it might be hard for you to find and keep good employees because you have challenges involving being an employee, but also if you do have employees ever, you'd have challenges in those areas, with work in general, maybe with health, with physical health. But again, like I said, as you mature, as you get older, you'll naturally become much better in those areas. You'll have better luck and you'll gain a lot of strength and insight in those areas. And once you get past your first Saturn return and then your second one, you'll probably have a really sturdy job. And if you are a business owner, you'd find good employees that you would be able to keep. Okay, so I don't know if that's making any sense, but that's pretty much what I see with your chart. I see someone who is very direct, very caring, compassionate, open minded, fiery at times, maybe a little bit neurotic. Um, but you just look like you want to have a good time. But you're also responsible, so that's nice. It's always nice when you can be both adventurous and want to have fun, but also be responsible and like take out the trash, pay the bills. Like Virgo's good at that kind of stuff. So, you have a nice balance there. Um, you don't have a lot of water planets. You only have, like, in general, I was just thinking you're very well rounded in that aspect. You've got a good balance of fire, earth, and air. And you have a good balance because you're so strong in Virgo. You're probably very much like Virgo, Sun, Mercury, and Ascendant in Virgo. But everything else is in fire and air. So, like I said, you're more easygoing, more. You're not as rigid as the normal Virgo. You're not as like serious or get worked up over little things that don't really matter. You're more easygoing, sociable. So that's good. There's a lot of balance there. The only place where it's not so balanced, and again, this isn't a bad thing necessarily, but you don't have any water plants, so you're probably not super. You probably don't like to be tied down with like too many emotions, or you're probably not a super sappy person. Like if somebody comes to you with a problem, you probably want to help them fix that problem, or you want to give them advice on what to do about it, or you want to help them like physically fix the problem. You're probably not super big on just like sympathy and um like sympathizing with them in a way. Like you're more empathy, less sympathy. You want to just physically, like Virgo is a fixer, so you want to just like fix the problem, I guess. Um, yeah, you don't have a lot of water, so you're not super emotional or sappy or um, yeah. So that's not a bad thing necessarily. Okay, I think I pretty much said everything. So yeah, hopefully that made sense. I think I covered the gist of everything. Let me know if you have any questions at all, or if I could always talk to you more about reading charts or about astrology in general. Um, yeah, so hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully some of that resonated. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.